When we had you on during the summer and we were all looking over the steering wheel at the Giannis decision while the bubble was wrapping up, you said that if Giannis doesn't sign for the supermax, the NBA might as well just remove that whole construct from the collective bargaining agreement, that it was created exactly for a player like this in a franchise like Milwaukee. He is now signed. So I'm assuming two things that I'd love to give you the floor on. One, the NBA is breathing a sigh of relief. And two, there are a bunch of teams that were hoping for Giannis to leave that are now on to plan B's long term. I'll give you the floor on who those teams are and what the NBA is thinking right now.
You know, I know that this sounds sort of like a little bit of a crazy statement, but Giannis signed that contract yesterday. You could make the case that it's the biggest moment in the Bucks franchise since 1974 when Kareem Abdul-Jabbar had beef Wellington and then looked up at Wayne Embry, the general manager, and said, "Hey, I want you to trade me." He had won a title there. He had just lost Game 7 of the finals and was the reigning MVP. They traded him to the Lakers some months later. The Bucks have not been back to the finals since. And for a small market team with an NBA superstar, there is no more fragile relationship. Giannis leaving the Milwaukee Bucks potentially sets them back a decade or more, 2 decades or 4 decades. You just don't get players like this. And so for Giannis to make this commitment to give them a gift, and one of the reasons it's a gift is not just because he's staying with them, but Rich, he could have signed this exact same contract next summer. By doing it now and giving up his options in free agency, he removes an incredible amount of stress that was going to be on the Bucks this season, and it does give the Bucks the best chance to be successful this year. But he gave away something to it. He gave away his optionality. This is just not something we see in the modern NBA. We just haven't seen players do this. The Supermax has worked in a couple of occasions, specifically for Damian Lillard. That captured him in Portland. He stayed. It did not work for Kawhi Leonard. It did not work for Anthony Davis. And so had this been the third one in a row where it didn't work, I do think it was going to be in peril. Now, if you watch the way teams operated in the offseason, you could definitely clearly see teams hedging. The Dallas Mavericks made moves to make sure that they could have cap space to sign Giannis. The Miami Heat signed a bunch of players to 1-year contracts so that they could open up space. The Toronto Raptors gave this contract to Fred VanVleet that looked like a valley and mountain. It started off high and the next year dips down to allow for more cap space to sign Giannis and then goes back up. The New York Knicks didn't spend their money to make sure that they had a spot open for him. So now those teams do have to move on. It was kind of like a poker game. They had all sort of put their chips in the center to ante. Now they're going to have to look at their other options. And like I said, maybe it includes James Harden. Maybe they wait and see what happens with Bradley Beal, who is sort of the next star player teams are keeping an eye on. Maybe you go down and look farther down the list, but certainly Giannis committing was not seen as good news for a lot of teams, especially in those types of markets in the last 24 hours.
And since we haven't seen something like this, as you said, in the modern NBA, I'm assuming we should also, assuming that we should also not expect Giannis to force his way out because he doesn't like what's happening so early on in his contract, right? Like we shouldn't expect that.
Well, that's a reality that exists. You know, just like in the entertainment business, and we're seeing it with Harden. We've seen it over and over. A contract is over when the talent says it's over.
Nice.
Now there is a 1 year is built into the Supermax. You can't trade a player for 1 year, so the Bucks are safe for this year. You're not allowed to trade them until next season. They are certainly not out of the pressure cooker. You know, if they don't continue to spend, and one of the things that they had to make clear to Giannis is, look, we're going to spend into the luxury tax, and it's going to be an expensive team because keeping Drew Holiday is probably going to cost them in the neighborhood of $30 million a year for a supporting player. They're already playing Chris Middleton $30 million a year, so they're going to be a very expensive team. But they definitely need to do that. But one of the reasons why this was such an incredible thing for them is even if Giannis comes to them in 2 years and is not happy with the way they're going and expresses an interest in leaving, he will be on a long-term contract and they will be able to get a king's reward for them. And they will not get a player like Giannis in all likelihood, but they will be able to protect their franchise. If he walks away next summer, you have a nuclear wasteland. So, nobody wants to talk about that in Milwaukee right now, and they shouldn't be talking about that, but that was definitely part of the calculus when they talked about this deal.
Hey, you watched all the way to the end. Thanks for that. Watch more right here.